And you're live.
And we are told that we are live. Welcome and happy Monday, everyone, wherever you're watching us from, along with North Dakota United President Nick Archuleta. I'm Director of Public Affairs Tom Gerhardt, and we're happy to be with you, and we're hoping there are no technical glitches. We've had a bit of trouble with our internet connection, but we think we have it solved, so that's the good news.
We've solved it. The good news is we have Kelly, and Kelly figured out if you plug it into the wall, it's better. So we're good to go.
Yeah, you know, we got rid of the thumb in the corner of the frame thing, and ever since then, you know, we've had trouble with technology. So maybe we have to go back to what worked for us in the first place. But we're happy that you're with us. Again, if you have any questions or comments, please type them in the thread on the Facebook page that you are watching. We see Karen has joined us from down in lovely Wishick. So we appreciate Karen joining us. And we got a lot of gun bills to talk about today. Guns and purrs, I think, is kind of what we've all been talking about around here. And those things are definitely taking shape. I think we're about at that 20-day.
Yeah, we are.
20 days left in the session or so. They hope to get out with 70. So things are going to start happening here.
Yeah, and things are starting to happen. But like you say, we have guns and purrs. I prefer Guns and Roses, but you know, you play what you get. So
welcome to the jungle.
Welcome to the jungle, exactly right. And it's true. The legislature is planning on being out of here. They think that Good Friday is going to be their last day. They wanted to save 10 days at the end of the session, as you know, Tom, in case they had to come back and deal with something that happens on the national level, like the repeal of the Affordable Care Act. So.
Right, and that good. We know the repeal and replace is underway. Wanted to say we have someone watching us from Dallas.
Repeal is underway. I don't think you can honestly say that replace is on the horizon yet.
We do have somebody watching in from Dallas, so Nancy, thanks for watching us from Texas.
Wow.
Nice to know that we have fans around the globe, or at least around the United States.
Don't assume that everybody's watching is a fan, Tom.
No, you know, we take generous liberties here. It's just,
that's right.
It's good for our egos. So House Bill 1169, Nick, we were both up at the Capitol today, and that's the constitutional carry bill. And that was introduced last week. Today, the Senate Judiciary Committee did some work on 4 bills, including 1169. Now this, as we saw firsthand, passed out of committee 4-2.
4-2, it sure did. And Senator Osland was wondering, you know, what was wrong with the system? And in fact, I think his words were, what is it we're trying to fix? And of course, the Senator Murdahl and others said that the right to carry an arm is absolute and shouldn't ever, you know, be encumbered in any way. And so I think that's why you saw the 4-2 split there. Frankly, when they were talking, it made it sound like the law that we have now is unconstitutional, although it's never been challenged. All this does is it allows somebody to carry concealed without a permit. So there's no test to take, there's no any other regulation that you have to have. So that's where it's at. It's going to the floor. I think it's already on the calendar.
Yeah, I just checked the Senate calendar, and it's already on the floor, about 6 bills down or so. So we will probably see a vote tomorrow on the Senate floor. In fact, we will on this 1169, the constitutional carry. Again, what you have to be 21, be a resident of North Dakota for a year, probably have no trouble in your past, so to speak, and
no serious
carry
trouble.
Concealed, no serious trouble.
Yeah.
So that again will be on the Senate floor tomorrow. Senator Nelson, Senator Osland voted against it, so a bit of a split vote there.
I just wanted to mention this. It was interesting. The Judiciary Committee Chairman, Mr. Armstrong, Senator Armstrong from Dickinson, made mention of the fact that he intends to, during the interim, to really go through all of the gun laws in North Dakota and make them more affirmative. He thinks that they're probably not. Oh, they're not quite right, and he wants to recast them in the affirmative as opposed to the negative, and so that'll be interesting to see what his work over the interim yields.
Yeah, he said he tasked himself with that. It appears that he finds them a little bit ambiguous and hopes to kind of clear things up for all of us. So yeah, the work he would do during the interim. House Bill 1395 is another gun-involved bill that passed easily out of committee this morning, 6-0. And that has to do with retired law enforcement and keeping up some training. They mentioned this LEOSA program and defines the dangerous weapons used. That appears to be well on its way without any trouble.
It sure is, and sure should be. I mean, these are professional law enforcement personnel. They've had all the training that they've over the course of their career, and barring any sort of illness or anything that comes up, they will be permitted to carry always.
House Bill 1190 received a 6-0 do not pass. Again, another one of the gun bills that was in the Senate Judiciary Committee this morning, or this afternoon, that is, for some work. And that, I even wrote it down here, was the bill that said anyone authorized by the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court, the Governor, Speaker of the House, or the President pro tempore of the Senate would be able to carry a concealed weapon on property owned or leased by the state. That bill, totally different than what was initially brought forward, and now nobody is in favor of it, the language, the way it's written.
Right, and when there was testimony on this last week, it became pretty clear that this was fairly ambiguous. I don't think that law enforcement, the Highway Patrol, certainly wasn't on board with it. Representative Becker, who I believe was the prime sponsor of this bill, mentioned that right now the Highway Patrol does not have the authority to provide protection at offices leased by the state of North Dakota. Well, the Highway Patrol got up and testified in the exact opposite. They do. If they're asked to, they would do that. But of course, you know, there are an awful lot of government buildings and that sort of thing. Our members let us know in no uncertain terms that they are not in favor of anybody but trained law enforcement officers carrying guns in their workspaces. It is hard to feel safe at work when you don't know who's packing a gun. And so we consider this to be a real victory. And
you mentioned your great example, I thought always, is just you work at the tax department and somebody's not happy with some work done, and you know, somebody just puts a gun on the desk to intimidate a little bit. I mean, this is a public space where we want our public employees to feel good about where they're at.
Oh, absolutely. I mean, people have to be able to do their work free from intimidation. And I'm not saying that everybody would walk in there and slap a gun down, but it doesn't take more than one person to do that. And we know that it could happen, and our members let us know loud and clear that they're not in favor of anybody, as I mentioned before, but trained law enforcement officers having guns in their workspaces.
House Bill 1273, the fourth and last gun bill that was worked on by the Judiciary Committee this afternoon, was a unanimous do pass, and that is the bill that you can have a gun in the church, but the church didn't want to be notified, law enforcement didn't want to be notified about that, and both in fact asked that that language be taken out of the bill, and then at the end of the bill they added an amendment 2 which removed liability of the church. And so although, as Chairman Armstrong said today, it's not blanket liability, there are certain circumstances, but that's where that bill's at, and that kind of swept through quickly as well today.
Sure, and in any of these gun bills, there is no such thing as blanket immunity. There's always the state can do what the state can do, but there's always the federal law and that component that weighs into. So you know, that's there, and that's being recognized now.
Now, we've gone through these four to build up to the one that we've been following so closely, which is House Bill 1310, which is the the bill that deals with guns in schools.
Yes.
And we knew that committee work, that was heard last week for the first time. It's now in committee. We heard last week from Chairman Armstrong. He didn't think there would be many or any amendments to any of these bills. That remains to be seen, but they did push 1310 off until tomorrow or perhaps even later in the week.
Yeah, they did. This is a very contentious bill. There's an awful lot of passions on both sides of this issue. Of course, every student and every teacher deserves to feel as safe as possible. But I guess the real point of contention is, what's the best way to make that happen? And I know that we have some members that disagree with me on this, but I also know what our members say about it, by and large. So we, of course, have taken a point to be opposed to this bill. We think that there are other ways to make people safe. For example, the state of North Dakota could offer school improvement grants that would allow for actual physical reconfigurations of entrances to schools and making them physically safer places. As you know, in a lot of the smaller communities, particularly those without newer facilities, they were built in a time where these horrific attacks couldn't be foreseen, and so they were planned accordingly. We live in a different time now, I'm sorry to say, but what can we do to make these things physically safer? The other thing is, what can we do about mental health in the state? It's a tremendous issue, not just for students, but also for adults. We live in very stressful times, and I think we're seeing that play out. And so if we could do something more to help teachers recognize when a student is undergoing an awful lot of stress, and then maybe make sure there are more counselors in our schools and more support around the whole idea of wraparound services for our students, maybe we can impact these issues in that way too. So it's not like we didn't go without alternative plans for them to consider, but we do believe honestly that there is some real danger attached with allowing guns in school, and we can cite them. I shared with you today a story of a teacher in, I believe it was in Utah, who shot herself, and she was an elementary school teacher. She had unholstered her weapon using the restroom, and then as she was reholstering that weapon, it fired and shot herself in the leg. There was another university teacher who shot himself in the foot and let a bullet go ricochet around a lecture hall. So accidents happen. We understand that that's not the intention of anybody, but we just think there's a better way.
We should mention that on the Facebook thread now, Kelly has put up links so that you can find out more about House Bill 1310, take a look at the entire document, and you can also make your voice be heard on House Bill 1310, just clicking on the link there in our Action Network to let your legislator know what you think about it.
Right, and that is so important. We have managed to mobilize our members in a lot of different ways around the DeVos issue, around the higher ed rule revision that would really negatively impact tenured faculty. We motivated people around a number of issues. This one's huge, and so we're asking you to please contact your senators. Let them know how you feel about the law or the proposed legislation, House Bill 1310, and let's let them know that we're not taking this session off. We're paying very close attention to what's happening.
And to your point about accidents happening, the bill as it reads now would allow anyone with 80 hours of training, and that's anyone essentially, to become an armed first responder in a school. And you talked about highly trained law enforcement and supporting that route, but the fact that anybody with minimal training could be holstering that concealed weapon in schools across the state in this pilot program, I guess it would be up to 10 for the start, is a little unnerving to say the least.
It is, and frankly, I don't know that enough study or thought has gone into this issue. It seems like it's the same remedy over and over and over again. Let's start looking at the bigger picture. Let's really start examining some of the options that are out there rather than just stick with the one option.
All right, well, House Bill 1310, guns in schools, we'll be keeping a close eye on that. We'll update you as more information becomes available. Let's switch now from guns to PERS. And House Bill 1436 was a delayed bill brought up after crossover by Representative Carlson, and that is the self-insured bill. And you spent a lot of time looking into this whole topic, and it's going to be in the Senate IBL committee for some work, probably now, likely tomorrow.
Yeah.
But without getting too much into the weeds, tell us a little bit about being self-insured as a state.
I will, and let me just start off by saying this. We don't know necessarily if self-insurance is the right way to go or if to have a fully funded health plan is the right way to go. Here's what we do know. North Dakota PERS right now has a hybrid plan. It's fully insured, but it's a hybrid plan that has all of the advantages with the exception of maybe 2 or 3 that a self-insurance plan has, plus the 4 big benefits that a fully insured plan has. So right now we have the best of both worlds. And if you had tuned in last Monday, we had our good friend Spark Collins, the executive director of PERS, and his board, I believe it was even that day, that morning, they had met, well, maybe it wasn't, maybe it was a week before, but anyway, they had met and decided not to take a position on it. And he said to us, he said, if we had just simply a fully insured plan and we're looking to go to a self-funded plan, he would advocate for the self-funded plan. But the thing is, ours is a hybrid plan, and as I mentioned, it's the best of both worlds. So he wasn't ready to make that choice. There are a couple of things working against this plan. First of all, as you mentioned, Tom, this is from the delayed bills. Representative Al Carlson put this in fairly late in the session. Remember, we've only got about 20 days. And this would instruct PERS then to switch to a different plan by July 1. And there just really is not enough time to do the due diligence to make sure that you got bids that are let. Frankly, if you're going to start letting out bids, you're not going to get much of a discount when they know that your back is against the wall. they're not going to come down on their prices because they know you have to buy something. And I just have this feeling that it would be more expensive, at least in the short term. So there's that. The other thing that it has going against it is that Sanford, who right now won the bid from Blue Cross Blue Shield, they contend that their contract is, you can't break that contract until 2021. And they said it's a constitutional issue. They will probably fight it. They believe me when I tell you, Sanford has just about as many lawyers as the new doctors. And so right now, IBL has asked for an Attorney General's opinion to verify whether or not Sanford is right in their assessment of the constitutionality. My guess is that I don't know. I'm not going to guess. I'm not a lawyer. So the bottom line is this. We need some time. It would be great if we could turn this into a study it over the interim, really find out what is right and what is in the best interest of North Dakota PERS. Remember this, the North Dakota PERS board has one fiduciary responsibility, and that is to make sure that North Dakota public employees, and believe me, they're from across the spectrum of public employment, have the very best plan that they have. They have a fiduciary responsibility to the plan. So we have trusted them to do the right thing in the past. We don't know if switching yet is the right thing. So my view is let's give them time to really investigate this and study this and make sure that they make the right decision based on facts submitted in a reasonable time manner.
Yeah, we'll know more about that tomorrow. Chairman George Kaiser is the chair of the House IBL committee, yes. So they'll be doing work on that. And we'll want to find out what happens. Sure. As you said, that window it's a narrow window, and a study, in fact, everybody that we've talked to, I think including SPAR, really favors, there's nothing wrong with looking into something and trying to find what's best for the people of North Dakota.
Exactly right, and I would just say this, that George Kaiser is one of the most honorable men serving in the legislature, and I really do appreciate his expertise in this area, but it's the time thing right now that I think we're up against. Had this bill been introduced sooner, it might be a different story, but I think right now we are just up against it in terms of time.
Christy writes on our wall, no to guns in school. She can't think of a reason to bring them into schools, even for grizzly bears, she jokes. And so she's contacting her senator, so we appreciate that. And Becky's watching, so we appreciate you tuning in, Becky. Which leads us to, I guess, the final bill we're going to talk about today, and that's House Bill 1023. And that was originally the PERS budget, their operating budget bill, and then right before crossover, Representative Carlson attached a large, at least many pages, amendment to 1023, which was, again, we've talked about it a lot, changing the governance of PERS. And that was stripped out by the Senate GBA committee and Chairman Poolman last week.
Right, and that's kind of what we had thought was going to happen, and we are glad it did. You're right, it was the PERS funding bill. So that bill should have gone right to appropriations. As you mentioned, just before crossover, 85 pages of attachments or amendments were put on. In all fairness, only the first couple pages were the meat and potatoes of the amendments, of the change the meaning of the bill. But there was a lot of policy in those couple of pages. And so for that reason, it went to Senator Poolman's committee. And she and the committee stripped out all of the amendments and has moved the bill over to appropriations to just fund PERS. And that was the good thing. That was the right thing to do.
And they are going to turn it sounds like, into a study.
Yeah.
Representative Carlson's proposal, which would, again, change the governance of PERS, get rid of the board, make an advisory committee. The governor would appoint a director, but you've mentioned several times the potential conflict the governor would face, whoever it is.
It's a terrible conflict for the governor because we're going to talk fiduciary responsibility again. He's the sole fiduciary for the state of North Dakota, and he would be then for PERS as well. And when those interests collide, he can only pick one. You don't get to split the baby here. And so he would be in violation of his responsibilities either to PERS or to the state, and he shouldn't be put in that position. At one point, Representative Carlson said he would put in an amendment to fix that. I haven't seen it yet. But most troubling about this, at least in my view, Tom, is that the PERS board is made up in large part of PERS members. And they have been charged with being the governance of the PERS plan. And their fiduciary responsibility is, as I mentioned before, to the plan. If this legislation were to have gone through, they would not be in charge of the plan, the one that they take part in. Frankly, it's like a lot like a co-op. You know, if you have some skin in the game, you're going to be a lot more careful with how it's run. And we believe that board has acted responsibly with the information they have. They've always been true to the PERS plan, and there's no reason to change the governance on that plan. It's been working great.
And as we mentioned, about 20 days to go to reach that 70-day mark that the legislature is hoping to stay. So that's Good Friday, I think, is when they're hoping to be done, saving that 10 days, as you mentioned. So a lot of things are going to happen in the next under 4 weeks or so now. And so we're keeping an eye on K-12 funding. We're keeping an eye on the university budgets and things like that. But all that still remains. The pieces of the puzzle need to be put together. And so
sure. Yeah, there's CTE funding still on the table. There's still the funding K-12. Is still in there in the mix, and nothing has been decided finally on that. But yeah, there's plenty still on the table. So really do stay tuned. I was just thinking back today to the first day of the session, and people are wandering in and they're slapping each other on the back and shaking hands and smiles all around. Well, now we're kind of into that stretch where people are really, kind of into the zone, into the groove of governance. It started slowly, but it's really picked up steam, and now we're seeing people really, honest to goodness, they're working hard, trying to do the right thing, and we're trying to help them, of course.
We should mention Senate Bill 2186, the Education Innovation Bill that we're so high on. We thought maybe that'd go to a vote on the House floor a couple of Fridays back. It's been shifted back to the House Education Committee where it remains, and so we are keeping our eye on that, and hopeful that gets passed on the House floor as well soon.
Right, and the innovation bill, frankly, the hang-up right now is that there is a representative or two who were not great big fans of our superintendent of public instruction. They lost a few discussions and frankly some legislation last year, and they haven't forgotten that. So their belief is that this innovation bill gives too much leeway or latitude to the excuse me just a moment. It's always something. Anyhow, the superintendent would have too much latitude to completely say or waive different statute and administrative rules. So they sent it back for a little bit more work. We're hoping that we can get this thing back on track and get it through and get it passed as quickly as we possibly can.
So, a lot to be determined in the next 4 weeks. Please stay tuned. Our Facebook Live should get more interesting, and our weekly Friday reports should be full of information as well.
Yeah, and my son won't need he's in track. He should run home.
He should run home. With that note, we thank you for joining us on this Monday afternoon. Have a great rest of your day.
All right. Bye-bye.